Looking at the editorials in Question Bank for 16th November. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper today is Back to the Collegium. So this is regarding the collegium system which was introduced by the judiciary. So how the appointments of judges should take place to the Supreme Court as well as to high courts, and how transfer of judges in the high courts would take place is determined through the collegium system. So that is the appointment system. It is said to be an opaque system, lacking transparency. Who are the members who have been decided to be part of the process of selection? Means amongst whom are the judges selecting members to the judiciary is not known. Also, what is the criteria for selection of judges is not known. So that is why collegium system is said to be an opaque system. The judiciary has taken over this initiative and given it on to itself. It is not specifically mentioned in the constitution. Means collegium system is not a constitutional process, but then it is said that the judges would be appointed by the president on the advice of the Supreme Court. So this advice is binding on the president, has been an initiative of the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court has expanded this collegium and the whole system through its various cases, in its judgment in various cases, and this collegium system has been established. You must have heard of first judge case, second judge case, third judge case. You can go through polity again in Lakshmikant to know about that too. So this collegium system has been in place for long, until the present government passed the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act. So this was a demand for long, that there should be an appointments commission for the judiciary through which appointments would take place, transfers would take place, even any complaints against the judges, means grievance redressal mechanism, should also be part of this appointments commission. So there should be a commission as such. So this NJAC Act as well as a Constitutional Amendment Act, which was an act passed by the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha by special majority as well as by half the states, was put into effect, but the Supreme Court rejected this Constitutional Amendment Act as well as the NJAC Act and declared them unconstitutional on the ground that it takes away the supremacy or the primacy of the judiciary in appointments cases. So we look at what happened too, because in NJAC Act there were 6 members. So 3 were from the judiciary, the Supreme Court and 3 other judges, and 2 senior most judges. So 3 from the judiciary, and on the other side, from the government side, it was the law minister and 2 eminent persons who would be appointed. So it was a 6-member committee. So 50-50 for both sides, judiciary and executive. So that is the ground, that if government wants to make a particular appointment, it's difficult. If the judiciary wants to make a particular appointment of a particular judge, it would not have a majority. Maximum, if only judges agree, it would be 3 judges agreeing. So that was the point which the judiciary put forth, that the judiciary should get the primacy in appointments. So on that ground, it rejected the whole Constitutional Amendment Bill as well as NJAC Act. So after it has been rejected, the Supreme Court said in its statement, in the judgment, same judgment, that we know that the collegium system is not up to the mark, it has deficiencies. So then there should be a procedure for appointment of judges which has to be determined, and it asked the government to decide that. So an MOP, Memorandum of Procedure, has to be determined by the government and submitted to the judiciary, and then the process would go ahead. So this MOP has been prepared by the government and given to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is looking into it. And in the meantime, how would appointments take place? Because if something has been declared void, it was expected NJAC would decide how the appointments would take place. Since that has been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, then how will it take place? It has to revert back to the old system, the collegium system, which the government is reluctant to go back to. There have been many emotional statements and speeches given by the Chief Justice of India to Justice Thakur, asking the government to not delay appointment of judges. There is a huge backlog of vacancies in the high courts all across India and the lower courts too. So to pass on the names which have been provided by the collegium to the government, it should accept it, was the suggestion given. And it also said, Justice Thakur also said, that if you don't want to accept the names given, at least return the names, but don't stall the process. So the recent news which we have discussed presently was also there. It was there in news. The editorial is on that. That out of the 77 names recommended, 43 names have been rejected. And then in the collegium system, it is so that if these rejected names are again given by the Supreme Court to the government, then it has to approve it. It cannot reject it again. So this is how the government is behaving right now. And the 34 names only have been approved right now in this process. So what we understand from this whole thing is that both the judiciary and executive have to come together and work together. The last statement made in this editorial is the center should not be seen as delaying appointments or seeking to dilute judicial supremacy, while the judiciary should not be seen as stalling improvements in the appointment process, which it itself says is required. So this is there. Then the MOP, we have already discussed these earlier. The memorandum of procedure is to be deciding on 4 aspects. That is the eligibility criteria for appointments, methods for making an appointment, establishment of a secretariat in the Supreme Court and High Court to look into this entire appointment process, and a redressal mechanism for complaints against potential candidates for judgeship. So these are the 4 points which will be decided in the MOP. Then the next editorial in today's Hindu paper is regarding again Donald Trump. So not significant for us, but then we know that protests are going on in USA against the president-elect Donald Trump, not my president. So now he's planning, Donald Trump is picking up his candidates who would be part of his executives in the White House. So the people whom he is taking ahead with him, some of them are even the conservatives, and another one is also the one who is on the healing side, because the vicious speeches which Donald Trump made as president would not be fully put into effect actually. So such members would also help that. But anyway, this editorial is of no significance for us from our exam perspective. Next, going to the question bank. So we have picked up 2 questions for today. The first question is based on the lead article, but frankly speaking, I did not find the lead article giving much points. So I have used other articles too, and the question has been framed. This is, there is a need to preserve the constitutionally ordained judicial equilibrium between the legislative, executive and the judicial branches of the government in India. Elaborate. So there is a need, it is clearly known that judiciary and especially the executive legislature have to be balanced. So in India, parliamentary form of government, executive and legislature actually overlap. So executive comes from the legislature. Those who get majority in the legislature form the executive. So it's basically between the government, legislature, executive branch and the judiciary that we need a balance. So why is the judiciary running supreme in India? So that we need to understand first. So the points put forth here are that the state, the government, the legislature and executive has lost the trust factor. The citizens no longer have complete trust and faith in the politicians, in the legislature and executive. So this breach of trust has resulted in their significance going down and people putting in their faith in the judiciary. So the judiciary has acquired supremacy through this process. So the article blames that the government itself has resulted, the legislature, executive itself has resulted in its trust factor going down. So this is there. Then it says the general feeling that the ordinary masses are too powerless against people with influence, political and otherwise, and that there is an increasing demand for court-monitored probes into cases being handled by investigating agencies, that they would be biased to the government in power. So this reflects the dissipation of trust, the critical social capital that makes democracies work. So this is the reasons for judiciary running supreme. Next, talking of the need for jurisdictional equilibrium. So there is a requirement for equilibrium between the judiciary and legislature. So the point put forth for this is that the judicial overreach exercised by the Supreme Court is not in tune with a democratical setup. So there should be rightful limits for judicial intervention, and policy making is the domain of the legislature and executive. They have been elected and through that process they have come to power. So there is a need for credibility which has to come from the political executives, and once that comes in, the judicial supremacy would automatically go down. Then next we talk of is the judicial restraint. So this is the judiciary itself has put restraint. So there are many a times that cases come before the Supreme Court and Supreme Court refuses to adjudicate on it or go according to the demands as such made for judiciary to intervene. Like today in news we discussed about the demonetization drive. The Supreme Court refrained from putting a stay on the order. So this again shows judicial restraint too. There are other examples too. So this is, the Supreme Court has many a time said that judges should not put in their own whims and fancies and own ideas of being protectors and upholders of law in the country, and their views been given as judgments. So Supreme Court has reprimanded its own judges too and given such judgments which have to be followed by all judges of the Supreme Court and lower courts too. So this an example is there. It says that discipline and restriction are two basic golden virtues within which a judge should function. Then another point which has been put forth by the Supreme Court, it says Parliament and the legislatures, composed as they are of representatives of the people, are supposed to know and be aware of the needs of the people and what is good and bad for them. The court cannot sit in judgment on their wisdom. So this is one statement made by the Supreme Court itself, which shows judicial self-restraint. So this is there. Then another one is on the PILs. Some example has been given on a PIL to bring moral science as a compulsory subject was put forth. The court declined to entertain such PILs. So there are many such cases where court declines to entertain matters being not in their domain. So this is there. Then the next what we discuss are cases pleading towards judicial overreach. So there are some examples when judiciary has intervened and that shows judicial overreach. So there is something called judicial review. So judiciary has the power to review. So judicial review is constitutional. Means any law, any act coming before the judiciary, it can adjudicate on it and show whether it is, and judge whether it is constitutional, legal or illegal. So that aspect can be decided by the judiciary. But then judicial overreach or judicial supremacy are negative connotation terms, means judiciary is overreaching its jurisdiction, going beyond its jurisdiction. So that is not a positive term. So the examples of judicial overreach, some cases which are seen are, one is regarding AFSPA. So of course the idea is that it is upholding the rule of law and looking into the welfare of the people because the center has failed. So that's what the whole argument is, that if center takes actions, then the Supreme Court's initiative and intervention would reduce. So like even presently the Supreme Court asked the government to report to it about the droughts and what actions have been taken to tackle droughts in various districts. So the Finance Minister Mr. Arun Jaitley had spoken about it, that the Supreme Court is intervening in all matters. But then if government itself takes actions and the citizens have faith in the government and show confidence in the government, then Supreme Court will not have to intervene. So that is how this entire thing is concluded too. That if center is able to bring in that credibility, even if the present government is able to bring in that credibility, then judicial overreach would reduce. So talking of some examples of judicial overreach too, one example given here is about AFSPA. So Armed Forces Special Powers Act, this was a recent September 2016 ruling, September or October ruling on Manipur case. So in this ruling, sorry, not September, it's July 2016. So July 2016 ruling on the Manipur case, AFSPA related case. So AFSPA gives immunity to armed forces, that they are immune from prosecution. But the Supreme Court said, yes, they are immune from prosecution, but that is not an absolute immunity. Means if the armed personnel has done something wrong, still he would get immunity? No. If it is done in his official capacity as part of his work, he has immunity. So there is a requirement for putting in an investigation on any such action which is questioned of the armed forces. So an inquiry has to be done, and if it is within capacity, fine. Otherwise, he has to be prosecuted. So it's not an absolute immunity. So that was the judgment given by Supreme Court, that if center says that it is immune, so that question of whether it is actually immune or not, that armed personnel, will be determined by the Supreme Court. Then next was awarding the BCCI. The Lodha panel had been set up by the Supreme Court. So case regarding IPL scam corruption had come up before the Supreme Court. So while adjudicating on this, it set up a panel to Lodha committee, which would bring in recommendations on BCCI to reform the BCCI. So this Lodha panel, appointed by the Supreme Court, headed by, it's a 3-member body comprising of judges, headed by former Chief Justice of India, Justice R.M. Lodha. It gave its list of recommendations to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court went through the recommendations and asked BCCI to implement almost all of them without modification, have to be implemented by the BCCI. And BCCI tried to delay that. It was also Lodha panel said that all the BCCI members presently, the chairs presently, have to be changed so that the Lodha panel recommendations would be implemented. With the present setup, it is very difficult. So this point was also ordered by the Supreme Court to BCCI, but they do not follow to the line. So this is the whole issue coming up. So even the BCCI is represented by former Supreme Court Judge Markande Kajju. So he says that judiciary is overreaching. The recommendations which have been given by a panel have all been approved by the Supreme Court and have to be implemented as an order. So the Supreme Court ideally should have sent these recommendations to the legislature and executive, to the government, both state and central, and they would have taken actions further. So this is again, he is showing that this is a judicial overreach. Then another is about the Kaveri water dispute. In Kaveri water dispute case 2, the center later we saw came up with its argument that Supreme Court has no powers to intervene on the judgment which has been given by Kaveri Water Dispute Tribunal. So the argument which was made was Article 131 of the Constitution gives the Supreme Court exclusive jurisdiction to adjudicate disputes between states. So this is a power which is there, but then the Attorney General said this is not an unrestricted power. Under Article 262(2), the Constitution allows the Parliament by law to bar the Supreme Court from interfering in the interstate water disputes. So this is an interstate water dispute for which a tribunal was set up, and it was there in the Tribunal Act that the judgment of the tribunal would be final and having the same effect as the Supreme Court order. So then there is no further question of going to the Supreme Court. But then even the Fali Nariman, who is a senior advocate representing Karnataka, he said that the Supreme Court has the power to admit appeals as a discretionary power. So a special leave petition is a special power, discretionary power with the Supreme Court, under which it can accept cases. So the states were not happy with the tribunal's order, and they approached, almost all of them actually approached the Supreme Court. So this is another aspect where a little of judicial overreach and the tussle between the legislature, executive and the judiciary is seen. The next finally is about judicial appointments. So this is regarding the NJSC. The NJSC Act, which we discussed in the editorial presently too. So this also shows judicial overreach about how the judiciary is not allowing the center to take action and nullifying the amendment acts, constitutional amendment acts. So that is there. So finally, the conclusion which is made is, if the present government can revive the state-citizen arrangement of trust, then the judiciary would recede to its place automatically, and then the jurisdictional balance between legislature, executive and judiciary can be brought in again. So this is the conclusion. Next, we look at the other question from an article from the Perspective page. So this is, discuss the need for a Good Samaritan law in India. What are the judicial rulings on the matter? So what is a Good Samaritan? Good Samaritan is a term which has emerged in the judiciary during cases which have been filed before the Supreme Court. So this Good Samaritan means a person who helps another citizen. So that is called a Good Samaritan. So this was a law for assisting people in need without any self-interest. So that is generally in case of accidents. So in case of road accidents, it is seen that people do not get involved in it. They do not touch the victim. They do not get him to the hospitals and to get first aid quickly. So that is because they are fearing themselves being involved in police cases, and there will be interrogations with them as well. So to keep away from all this, as they say, police ke chakkar mein nahi padna hai. So from that perspective, people don't come ahead. So to correct this, to reverse this scenario, the judiciary has called for a Good Samaritan law. So it has asked the center to bring out detailed guidelines regarding this, which the center has already done. Then also a standard operating procedure on this has to be brought in, which again the center is working on, is bringing in. So this is what is discussed here. So question first of all is, discuss the need for a Good Samaritan law in India. So Good Samaritan law is specifically more important in India because road accidents are drastically high in number in India. According to World Health Organization estimate, by 2020, India would have accidents as the biggest killer. So that is the significance. There are, it is said, 16 people killed in road accidents every hour in India. every day 387 people die due to road accidents. So this is 2014 figures. So this shows how much the loss of life happens due to road accidents. And also it is seen that this loss of life is because first aid is not provided on time. It is called the golden hour. The first hour after an injury is said to be the golden hour. If aid is provided during that time, then the person can be saved as well. So that golden hour is lost because nobody comes forward, easily to assist another person. So this is the reason that we need a Good Samaritan law in India. So people fear the legal consequences if one's actions are ineffective or harmful. They fear the subsequent involvement in investigations, the long-drawn legal procedures, repeated police questioning and court appearances. So that all will eat up on their time. So therefore they think before providing a helping hand to an accident victim. So taking all this into consideration, there is a need for a Good Samaritan law in India. And the Supreme Court has passed a judgment on it. It was Save Life Foundation versus Union of India case, in which the Supreme Court has directed the center to establish guidelines for a Good Samaritan law. So this has already been done by the government. This, as you see here, it is in October 2014 that the Supreme Court directed the center to frame these guidelines. The first draft of these guidelines was given in May 2015. Subsequently, even a standard operating procedure was put forth in Jan 2016. So all these checks are in place to ensure that a Good Samaritan is not harassed by the police or in later investigation, even in courts. So what are the provisions which have been put forth are detailed out here. There will be no criminal or civil liability against him. There is no compulsion to disclose identity. There will be no disciplinary action taken against him by any officer. There will be no examination, intimidation or harassment by police or court. Hospitals should not seek details from him or demand any registration fee. Doctors must compulsorily attend to an accident victim. They should not wait for form filling and other legalities. Disciplinary action against doctors refusing to treat a victim. Mandatory for hospitals to implement guidelines. License to revoke for failure of implementing guidelines. Highway police in all states and enough trauma care centers to be established. So these are the provisions which even the Supreme Court appointed committee, Case Kandan committee, had put forth, and the center has now brought in guidelines on these lines. So these are provisions in place, and as you can see here in this diagram too, in this image, that the number of accident victims which we see, the vehicles involved in these accidents in India are majorly trucks, tempos, tractors and two-wheelers, 25. So this comprises almost 50% of the vehicles involved. Then the causes of road accidents, 77.1% of the times is fault of the driver. So this is also important. Then now presently the Supreme Court has asked the center to advertise these guidelines, because it says that though the guidelines have been put forth, there is not enough advertisement given. Not all are aware of this. So even it talks of even first aid related information should be given to students as well. So it should be part of the curriculum in textbooks also. So all these initiatives have to be taken to ensure that the road accident victims are provided aid in time, and common people are not unnecessarily harassed for a good deed which they do. So Karnataka is bound to be the first state which will put in a Good Samaritan law in place. So this is also the initiative taken here at the state level. So center has also started the initiative, but then its publicity is important so that it comes into effect, that people know that they would not be harassed and they easily come forward. So that is it. These are the two questions for today. Thank you.